Are you taking care down there? If not, my friend, you should check out this video sponsor, Manscaped, the undisputed leader in male grooming tech that'll keep you looking fresh and correct from tip to hairy toes. Their industry-leading Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra is still the ultimate piece of kit for pruning or removing body hair, and Manscaped have just released it in a super limited edition Desert Sand colorway. Get 15% off plus free shipping when you use offer code SKILLUP at checkout. Click below to grab one or stick around to the end of the video to learn more. Surprise! Assassin's Creed Black Flag Resynced preview video. I've played it, I visited the studio making it in Singapore, I've interviewed the game's director, Paul Fu, and I have a hell of a lot to relay to you, but before that, let's be clear on what exactly I experienced so you know what to expect. I did spend a full day at Ubisoft's Singapore-based studio. Ubisoft did generously offer to cover the cost of my flights and accommodation, but as usual, I declined, choosing instead to cover my own costs so that you can be guaranteed truly independent coverage. And if that matters to you, then do consider signing up and supporting what we do over at thisweekinvideogames.com. The day consisted of a few elements, the first being a welcome presentation from the game's director, Paul Fu, where he outlined the major changes and improvements that Resynced aims to bring. After that, we spent some time with the game's audio director, who told us about the significant overhauls coming to the game's sound mix, including full support for Dolby Atmos setups. Next, we sat down with members of the technical team for a deep dive into the ways that the new Anvil engine is breathing new life into the Caribbean setting, including things like more detailed visuals, ray trace lighting, and more sophisticated weather effects. After that, I spent a full 4 hours plus playing the game, a mixture of campaign missions and free roam. And finally, I had an interview with Paul Fu, where I got to ask anything I wanted, and he certainly gave me some fascinating answers. I guess the last thing you should know before we really get stuck into it is, I love Assassin's Creed Black Flag to an unhealthy degree. It's not only my favorite AC game, it may well be one of my favorite games, full stop. If you played it back then you would know what an incredible breakthrough it was. Its sense of breadth and adventure was almost peerless for its time. Its technology was astounding, rendering such a vast world so seamlessly and so effortlessly. Its careful balance of mission-based stealth and action with open-world exploration and discovery was pitch perfect. And the writing. God in heaven, this writing. Such vivid characterization, such an engaging thematic plot, such poetry in the turns of phrases employed, all of them so masterfully delivered by this absolutely flawless cast of voice actors. I actually went back recently to do a replay in preparation for this review, and I expected to encounter a game that had aged fairly poorly in the intervening 13 years. The exact opposite was true. I was floored by how well this game holds up all these years later, to the point where I was asking myself, how do you even remake this when it feels like a remaster would suffice? And if you are going to be bold enough to remake it, how do you do so without messing it up? Some of the answers I was looking for came in the opening presentation from the game director Paul Fu, and the first thing he said to us is that the starting point for all of their work was a deep reverence for the source material, because many of the people who are working on Resynced actually worked on the original. Yes, the original game's development was led by Ubisoft Montreal, but Singapore was a support studio that provided a lot of support across various parts of the game, with a particular focus on naval combat. Almost all of the team members we met during our tour had worked on the original in some capacity. And I'm going to tell you right now, the way these people talked about this game and the work they've put into it, you can tell they take a lot of pride in what they built all those years ago, and they're very earnest in their desire to bring it to a new generation of fans. That also manifests in one of the major design philosophies that underpins Resynced. Fu said repeatedly that their starting point was a desire to protect what was already there, and after that, improve it or add to it where it made sense. They don't view Black Flag as something that needs to be fixed, they view it as something wonderful that they now have the opportunity to revisit and add to. I think that comes through most strongly in the revised combat, which we'll definitely talk more about later, but it's not what you'd expect. It's not modern AC combat dropped into Black Flag, it's its own unique combat model that is greatly inspired by the original combat, for better or worse. Like I said, we'll come back to that. Fu also made clear that Resynced is absolutely not just a new coat of paint. I was very surprised to learn that they're adding around 6 hours of new content to the game that includes new islands and locations, side quests, a new naval officer system with 3 recruitable officers and 10 new missions between them, an expanded hideout with new narrative content and 2 new characters, as well as an entirely new endgame chapter called A World Without Gold, which is actually an epilogue to Kenway's story. That is a lot of new stuff and already positions Resynced as one of the most ambitious remakes ever made. But it doesn't stop there, because in addition to all of that new content are major overhauls of key game systems like mission structure, collectibles, naval combat, melee combat, stealth, as well as big changes to the game's weather system, resulting in both enhanced visuals and gameplay affecting mechanics. And speaking of visuals, yeah, it also got that new coat of paint, being rebuilt entirely in the latest version of the Anvil engine, the game looking absolutely incredible, and I can't wait to show you more gameplay throughout this video. So that's what Ubisoft are aiming for, and the obvious question then becomes, how well are they hitting these goals? Well, important caveat here, I only played for 4 hours, and the build I was playing on was still not finalized since the game is in active development, which means that I certainly can't offer a definitive view yet, but I will tell you right off the jump, this is looking pretty damn solid so far. Not perfect, and there are a few nitpicks I'll get into, but Black Flag was an incredible video game, and this is still Black Flag. Some elements have been changed in ways that I'm sure some people won't love, but none of those changes are so profound that they stop this from being Black Flag. So far, Resynced is shaping up to be the definitive Black Flag experience, and honestly, that's a bit of a relief, because I went into this preview a little skeptical. I was thinking, man, what if they fuck it up? What if they somehow find a way to ruin this near perfect video game? After 4 hours though, I don't think they're fucking it up. I think they're doing a really good job with it. The visual uplift is extraordinary. The new sound mix is fantastic. The weather system is great. The mission structure changes are welcome. The UI and menu overhaul is a real win because the original's menus have aged terribly. They were honestly the worst part of going back to replay it recently. Having said all of that though, there are a few things that aren't landing for me just yet. Combat is the biggest one. I suspect you'll hear some mixed commentary from other previewers about the combat, which is perfectly fair, but I will say that I think the way combat was demoed to us in this preview wasn't great. But it was only after I spoke to the game's director that I started to understand what they were actually going for, and so I'm definitely not passing judgment just yet. The same could be said of the story edition, since the new story I did experience wasn't really floating my boat, so to speak, especially when it came to the tone and the sharpness of the writing. And finally, parkour is one of those things that's just different, not necessarily worse than the original, but it just has a different feel, and I'm sure the hardcore parkour community are going to have plenty to say about it when they do get their hands on it. But even with these hesitations, Resynced is looking like both faithful homage and ambitious reimagining. And while it's possible that some parts of this package don't hit the mark, I get the distinct feeling that the overall offering is going to be a much needed win for Ubisoft and a brilliant way for returning fans or first timers to experience the legend of Edward Kenway. Let's kick off with the easiest thing to talk about, visual glow up. Black Flag Resynced has been rebuilt in the most modern version of the Anvil engine, the same one that powered Assassin's Creed Shadows. Now, whether you like that game or not, one thing we could all agree on was that Shadows was a damn fine looking video game, helped in no small part by the advancements to the Anvil engine, which could now handle more sophisticated lighting and weather effects. Locations could be utterly transformed by time of day lighting shifts, by the change from summer to winter, and Black Flag benefits immensely from those same technologies. We did see a live demonstration of the way that time of day affects a scene's visuals using a debug build of the game, but we were also able to experience a little of that ourselves since the game does let you pass time. This cavern that would have been fairly dark and torchlit at night now has that beautiful light shaft running through it, and you can see for yourself just how much better this space looks than the original. Having just played the original Black Flag on PC at 4K resolution, I remember thinking to myself, the original still looks pretty damn good all these years later. And that's true, I think, owing largely to some fantastic art design and some bold use of color that gives the visual palette an almost stylized quality, even though it's still seeking to remain grounded and realistic. Seeing those same colors here in the remake with this level of graphical fidelity and detail, with this many people walking the streets of Havana, it was incredible, man. It really just feels like they brought the CG cutscene from the original game to life and made it playable. YouTube will no doubt compress this, but trust me, when you see all of this for yourself, you're going to be pretty blown away by what Ubisoft have done here. And look, maybe this is just headcanon stuff, but I do reflect on what I said in the intro about the team really taking pride in their work. I don't think you get a game that looks this good unless the developers are really going the extra mile to pack tiny, barely perceptible details into the cloth and the leather and the wood grain and the stone floors and the painted shutters and all the rest. It would have taken a staggering amount of work to create visuals this dense and this detailed, and it just looks absolutely fantastic. In addition to the visuals, sound design has had a big overhaul too. We spent some time with the lead audio supervisor and he walked us through what's changed. The way he described it, in the original, ship combat essentially had one sound point that everything was measured against, namely the center mast. In Resynced, it's using Dolby Atmos powered tech that brings a more object-focused sound mix, delivering more accurate sound since every object now has its own sound physics. So the sound of a cannonball flying over your head is captured way more accurately than the original ever could manage, and you'll hear those benefits even if you aren't running an Atmos setup. Music has also been overhauled, with many of the returning tracks featuring new stems to give them more texture, and during combat, music will actually dynamically sync to your chain takedowns, which the team was particularly proud of since this apparently took a hell of a lot of work to pull off. Finally, and most importantly, new shanties! We're getting a bunch of new shanties, baby. And some of the shanties even sing of Edward Kenway himself, since it only makes sense that his legend grows as his exploits throughout the Caribbean bring him more fame and fortune.
England, all Ireland, England, all Ireland, England, all Ireland, Ollie, Ollie, oh.
The last thing we might drop into the remaster bucket are menus and UI, which I'm sure sounds like an oddly specific thing to call out, but like I said at the top, the menus in particular have aged terribly since the original, and here they're way better. It's a more modern character sheet, it's easier to navigate, clearer about which gear you have equipped and what it does. You'll also notice some new weapon types added since there are now 3 classes of sword, each with their own specific moveset, as well as a new system of trinkets, little things that you can equip to give you minor stat bumps. For example, I found one trinket that increases Kenway's breadth underwater. Another one Ubisoft showed us is a trinket that heals you on a perfect parry, that sort of thing. So visuals, sound, music, and menus, these are the things you might expect from a more limited remastering, and they're all here and they're all great. They represent the baseline offering that Ubisoft could have probably just gotten away with if they weren't looking to do anything more ambitious, but this is not a remaster, it is a remake. So now let's look at all the ways that Resynced looks to refine, expand, and potentially improve Kenway's saga. One thing the team kept coming back to in all the presentations we saw was the new weather system, and it's a perfect addition to a game set in the Caribbean. The previous game also had a weather system, but it's much more ambitious here. The wind will gale stronger, the rain will fall heavier, it'll form puddles on the ground, and those puddles will remain for a time after that rain stops. With ray tracing on, these puddles become reflective, which adds much more depth and texture to the environments. The weather system is best felt out on the open seas though. Storms existed in the original, but the new ones feel more organic, and they actually limit visibility, which they didn't before. Here's how game director Paul Fu put it when I asked him about the design intent, quote, "Weather was something that I also worked on in the original Black Flag. There's always this slight struggle of, should we make the weather visualization block the view of the player? You have to provide a balance of chaos versus gameplay, so I think we struck a good balance in Resynced. We amped up the visualization and we accepted the fact that sometimes you can't see, and that's going to be okay," end quote. There's also a new weather effect called a rogue wind, which works like the rogue waves of the original except in wind form. You're racing along and all of a sudden a big gust buffets your ship in one direction and you have to steer the other way to compensate.
Time out.
Finally, weather has gameplay impacts on land too. Kenway's visibility in stealth is now affected by day-night cycles and heavier weather, which we'll certainly come back to. So weather is a definite win thematically, visually, and in a gameplay sense. Let's talk now about refinements to mission structure. You might have forgotten this, but in the original, everything was framed as a memory sequence. Every quest had to be started by walking up to a stationary NPC, pressing a button and triggering a cutscene. Then the mission would play out, and at the end you'd get a rating based on optional objectives. You'd also have the chance to rate the mission and give feedback to Ubisoft. I always wondered whether or not Ubi ended up looking at that feedback or they just kind of stored it somewhere in some big server. Anyway, all of that is gone now, and it's much more seamless and much more immersive. When you want to start a mission, you often just walk up to someone and it triggers automatically. During the missions, there are no longer optional bonus objectives. There's no more pop-up freeze frame at the end and no chance to fill out a customer survey. It all just flows as it does in the modern games. Tied to this, the missions themselves have been reworked too. Desync was a big part of the original. Get spotted in a follow or escort mission and you were instantly instantly desynced, sent back to the start of a mission or a checkpoint. In Resynced, if you get spotted in a stealth mission, you can just keep going. Ubisoft has rebuilt those failures to branch the quest forward instead of dropping you into a desync. I didn't experience that for myself because I didn't fail anything. Humble brag. But that's what they promised, and it's a nice change because Star Wars Outlaws reminded us that instant fail stealth missions really suck. This is probably a good time to mention that the modern day stuff has been removed. For anyone who hasn't played the original, the conceit of older Assassin's Creed games was that they were actually memory simulations, and you were playing some person at a desk in a VR headset reliving these memories while they were being mined by Abstergo, a nefarious corporation that was secretly being run by the Templars. It was actually pretty cool, and it's not here now. Instead, they've said these sequences will be replaced by little segments that dive deeper into Kenway's own memories. Ubisoft are calling them modern day riffs focused on Kenway's internal struggles. And look, while I understand why Ubi made this call, I gotta say, I don't love it. I think the original modern day sequences added a really clever, mysterious twist to the game. There was something in them, this idea that this was all part of a meta storyline that you would dip in and out of, that there was this broader intergenerational intrigue playing out, the impact of Templars echoing through the ages, and you're still living under the yoke of their tyranny. There was just something in that, and it's not there now, and I think it's a bummer. I haven't experienced any of the new Kenway content, so I can't say if it makes up for it, but I don't see how it could because the two have completely different objectives. Like I said, I get it since modern AC games have completely abandoned the modern storyline, but I think at least a little bit is lost by Resync not letting a new generation of fans experience what was, in my view, a pretty central part of the old AC experience. So that's the content removed. Let's talk about new content being added. First up, it's subtle and easy to miss, but you might notice new voice lines added to existing quests. They're not too numerous, but having just played the original, I definitely noticed a few of them. They're fine. I don't think they're strictly necessary, but they don't detract from what's there either. Number two, new locations and updated location activities. I got to experience one of these updated locations during my preview, that pirate cave just outside of Havana. In the original, you had to find 4 unique chests all hidden on land, but here in Resynced, you sneak in and the pirates start talking about where they've stashed their treasure, and they're like, your average pirate would have kept it on the land, but not me, I'm smarter than that. Is that a pirate accent? I don't think it is. Anyway, point is, it's obvious that the chest is in the water, and sure enough, it is. And the thing is, you can actually get to it now, because one of the biggest changes in Resynced is that Kenway can dive into any body of water. Before, diving was restricted to just the diving bell sequences, but now you can dive in pirate caves, in rivers, in lagoons, and anywhere in the open ocean. I'm sure there are many, many secrets waiting for us, hidden in all sorts of places that we couldn't reach before. Another example of a reworked activity was this fort siege. In the original, the breach involved killing just one officer, but here in Resynced, I had to wear down the morale of the troops by killing a whole bunch of them. For what it's worth, I actually kind of like that Kenway used to make a beeline for the officers as the battle raged around him. That was kind of cool, but honestly, this is fine too. There's also the level design overhaul that's occurred with each of these side content spaces. All of them had big and small differences to their layouts, with the net effect of each space feeling more dense with more to climb on or hide behind. All right, up next, new story content. Now, as we've already mentioned, some of this attaches to the main quest by way of those Edward Kenway memory segments. The biggest and most surprising addition, though, is an epilogue called A World Without Gold. It's 8 new missions and introduces a new character, and on top of that, there are additional side missions that resolve storylines left open in the original. That's honestly pretty cool, and a real carrot for returning fans, since they aren't just going to be experiencing the same story they remember from back in the day. The Hideout, which is your home base, has been expanded with new narrative content, new side quests, secrets, and 2 new characters living there. I didn't get to experience any of that in the preview, but I am looking forward to it. The most advertised new story content is the new Naval Officers system. Ubisoft has added 3 recruitable naval officers, each with their own quest lines and a unique perk for your ship, totaling 10 new missions between them. The mission I got to play through involved Lucy, who's a shipwright. When you recruit her, she joins the Jackdaw, and the upgrade she brings improves bracing, which is, you kind of hold the B button when you're about to take cannon fire. With Lucy on board, if you time it perfectly, you'll take even less damage than you otherwise would. Cool system, I think. I like the idea we're going to be collecting these officers, getting new abilities through them, building out the ship as we go. My concern is the storytelling side of things. I guess I'll just play this clip and then we can talk about it after.
You could join us. You won't find a better ship than the Jackdaw, nor a fairer crew.
Christ, you're relentless.
I need you.
So you said. You did keep me from hanging.
True?
But that doesn't mean you own me.
Also true.
The jackdaw's not a bad tub. And the crew know their work well enough. What else have you got for me?
I'll show you.
Now look, I'm sure that part of this is just me with nostalgia goggles on, guarding too jealously this story and these characters, but for me, this doesn't feel quite right. Lucy seems fine actually, it's more Kenway who seems too cheery, too quick to state his need, too quick to trust, and what the hell is this pose he's striking? But obviously, you can't judge a story on the basis of a single cutscene, that would be ridiculous. All I will say is that this one didn't fill me with a lot of confidence, and I'm gonna reserve judgment on this stuff until I've experienced the full offering. Black Flag's original naval combat was frankly an all-time achievement, and while Resynced doesn't alter any of the fundamentals, some newly added weapons and secondary fire modes aim to enlarge the combat sandbox. The main new weapon types are heated shots, engineered by Adewale himself. It's a rapid-fire naval weapon, basically a way to keep sustained pressure on a ship when you don't want to wait for your cannons to reload. Beyond that, chain shots get a double shot secondary, fire barrels return with a larger area of effect, which is really good because they were definitely too small before, as well as a shrapnel barrels secondary fire mode, which honestly sounds pretty cool. The mortar also gets something called Dead Man's Cohort, which concentrates mortar damage on your aimed location. There's also a really notable change to swivel guns. They used to be a kind of quick time event where you just hold down the Y button to fire them, but now you actually have to manually aim them at the weak spot yourself. Generally, I'd characterize these changes as fairly minor since the overall flow of naval combat remains largely unchanged. Much the same could be said for stealth, which feels very similar except for one big change: crouching on command. In the original, you couldn't actually choose when to crouch. Kenway would always decide that for you, which often led to weird moments where Kenway would kind of stand up in the middle of a sneak. In Resynced, you can choose to crouch anywhere, full stop. That alone considerably changes how stealth feels. New takedown animations are also a nice touch, and Kenway's visibility is now impacted by day-night cycles and heavy weather, which means you can actually use a storm as cover or wait for nightfall if you want to make a tricky approach easier. So while changes to naval combat and stealth are fairly minor, changes to melee combat are anything but, and this is no doubt going to be the most talked about part of Resynced, so let's get into it. Combat in the original Black Flag was a very simple affair by modern standards. You attack, your attacks worked on most low-level enemies, you could knock them over in a few hits, done. Some enemies would block you, in which case you would press A to break their guard and then recommence attacking them, and that was basically it. There were flourishes on top of this, like smoke bombs to disappear, using enemies as human shields against gunfire, pulling out your pistols for a volley. The core loop was pretty simple. A big part of it was about standing your ground, waiting for a counter opportunity, creating an opening through patience, sort of like Batman Arkham, but with less forward momentum. It was a sword duel after all, never centered on relentless aggression, more of a back and forth. When Resynced was announced, the immediate concern was that it would go full modern Assassin's Creed RPG combat, extremely focused on relentless aggression, on throughput, on spamming big ability cooldowns, on dumping everything you had as soon as it was available. Given how central that combat style is to modern AC games, it was pretty safe to assume that that's where Ubisoft would take Resynced as well. But combat in Resynced is definitely nothing like that. The official line from the presentation was that combat rewards player skill over DPS, staying true to the identity of the original game. Food made the point that all moves unlock very early on in the game with no skill trees at all. You get your full kit relatively quickly, and the rest of the game is about how you use that kit. So, how do you use it? Well, there's only one attack button, R1, which you are hitting constantly. A lot of the time it works, a lot of the time it doesn't because the enemy will block your attacks. There's no more guard break ability now. Instead, enemies have a defense meter, and your attacks will actually chip away at it, but you can instantly empty it with a perfect parry or a gunshot. When an enemy is blocking and you don't have a parry opportunity or any ammo to shoot them with, the best thing you can do is leg sweep them, which honestly is a little broken in the sense that you can sweep most enemies straight to the ground, do a quick finish up, and take them out. The big new layer is the chain takedown system. Land a perfect parry and you can chain into a takedown that hits up to 4 enemies at once, depending on your weapon of course. Speaking of weapons, swords are now split into 3 classes: rapier, cutlass, and pistol sword. Each class has its own unique heavy strike, which is a new attack type that deals high damage and hits a wider area. So which sword you pick actually changes how you fight, not just the damage numbers. There's also a new elite enemy archetype called a demolitionist, wielding a blunderbuss and chucking grenades at you. Ubisoft added this enemy type in response to community feedback actually, which is a nice touch. So when we got hands on, I think we all saw that defense meter and we just thought, well, I guess I'll just spam R1 until that bar fills up. And honestly, that works. You can get through pretty much every combat encounter by just mashing R1 and sweeping guards to break their stance. So I, and a few other people I spoke to about the combat, came away from the preview a little underwhelmed by the combat. I was thinking, okay, what you've made here works. It does feel more modern. It does feel true to the original, which is great, but it doesn't feel particularly ambitious. You've made a passable combat framework instead of a good one. Then I sat down with the game director, Paul Fu, and asked him point blank what they were actually aiming for with this combat. And here's what he said to me, quote, "Combat is heavily inspired by YouTube videos actually. We went to look at YouTube fan videos from the original, where there's lots of pistol shots in between chains and all that kind of stuff. We really wanted variety, but I also identified in the original there is visual variety, but when it comes to gameplay variety, what I mean by gameplay variety is tactical decision making, it wasn't exactly there. You had the freedom to do whatever you want in the original, but the decision may not necessarily have the same weight. So how we approach combat in Resynced, I'm kind of a fighting game nerd. We use the concept of flowcharting. If you did a perfect parry in Resynced, you would then do a chain takedown. But if you didn't do a perfect parry, you did a normal parry, your brain suddenly has to go down route B instead of route A. You then have to perform maybe a combo into a rope dart, into a sweep, into a ground takedown. But if there's a guy next to you on a wall, you don't want to waste your time, you just kick him and then you perform a wall takedown. Every decision that you make matters more than the traditional AC style RPG. So it's not much about DPS or weapon perks, it's about road A, B, or C, not 100 roads, because if the amount of decisions you give to the player is complete freedom, then the decisions no longer make sense, which is why we designed this, what I call a deterministic fight system, end quote. That conversation was really important, to be honest, because we were never told any of this before we were handed the controller, and nothing in the game tutorializes this combat philosophy. As Fu was describing this to me, I was like, oh, right, okay, now I see it. And I really wish I could have gone back to the game to play this way, because I didn't really know that that's what he and his team were aiming for. And honestly, it makes a lot of sense, and it's a cool goal to have. And looking back on my time playing, I can see the pieces, and I can imagine how you could have combined them to create the exact scenarios that Fu was describing. I actually mentioned to him that I wasn't playing in the way that he was describing, and I was just relying on R1 spam a lot of the time, and he acknowledged that that's sort of built into the game too. Quote, "For me, AC is a mid-core or low-core game. It's not necessarily a hardcore game, so we actually on purpose allowed a bit more spamming, at least in the northern regions. When you get to the southern regions, it gets a little bit harder to spam," end quote. So that's the structure, I guess. The northern regions are more forgiving and let you kind of just vibe with the combat, but as you push south, the enemies get tougher, and the deterministic decision-making starts to matter. There's also elite versions of enemies with golden epaulets that show up later. They parry faster, deny more, adapt more. So while combat wasn't clicking for me in this preview, I really do want to give it a second chance because I think there's a lot more to it that I haven't yet experienced owing to my own lack of understanding and also not yet encountering these more challenging enemy types. One thing I definitely did not like though is the visual flair and soundscape of combat. I think they really overcooked this. The big explosive parry animations from the trailer, I saw those and thought, what the fuck is that? Having now experienced them, I can confirm I do not like these at all. Talking about a pirate game where steel meets steel, it feels goofy to have a giant animated explosion every time 2 swords touch, and the audio that goes with this is just so boomy and loud. It's a lot, man. Combat starts to feel less like a duel and more like an extension of the naval warfare, full of explosive animations and explosive sounds. I really don't like it at all, and I think taking the edge off these big parry animations and the sound would really be a good thing.
Your last mistake, mate! How dare you!
So TLDR on combat, I think it's too early to judge. I know that sounds like a bit of a cop-out, but it's the honest truth. You're gonna hear plenty of opinions on combat, and I think all of them are fair. The context matters, and I really wanna give this combat a proper shot in a setting where I can actually learn it and figure out whether or not it delivers on the developer's intent. Right now, I just can't say.
We could work together on this!
Final thing to talk about is parkour. Now, if you are not an Assassin's Creed enthusiast, You may not be aware that the moment the gameplay trailer for Resynced dropped, the enthusiast AC community immediately started cutting comparison videos dissecting the parkour differences between the original and Resynced, and the development team is paying close attention to this actually, since the game director told me, quote, "We work with the community to try to identify very specific problems with parkour. Almost every day, we actually file issues with parkour so we can fix them," end quote. So why would parkour demand so much attention? Surely it's a pretty simple situation of just, jumping on buildings, right? Definitely not. Quick context for all the people who aren't across this stuff. The older AC games had a really beautiful, smooth, weighty flow to parkour that the newer games just didn't have, as well as a number of advanced parkour movesets that give you a lot of freedom to move in fun, expressive ways. In addition to that, the older games forced you to navigate space more meaningfully. You couldn't just press forward on a sheer wall and climb it. The newer games let you do that, which was terrible and it felt dumb. Shadows and Mirage walked back from that and made handholds matter again, which was a huge win. But there's always been an ongoing complaint that even with handholds back, the new parkour just doesn't feel as weighty, doesn't have the same kinesthetic feel that the original games do. Playing Resynced after just replaying the original, yeah, you can immediately feel that this is a different parkour model. The original Black Flag parkour was quite weighty in the way that Kenway would move, and it was also quite rigid with the way that it would snap Kenway to specific handholds. It's a very different feel here in Resynced. It's much more about immediacy, smoothness, glide, and pace. The first thing I noticed was that Kenway can now jump a significant height without a clamber animation. He couldn't do that before. A jump that tall required him to push up with his leg and would take a moment for that animation to roll. Here he can just jump straight up. Once you're moving, you can feel it is more floaty. Kenway doesn't land as heavily, as deliberately as he once did, and that may upset people who love that old feeling. But the trade-off is that you have more freedom to choose direction mid-flow, since the game isn't snapping you to specific handholds and jump directions as aggressively. The original was much stickier, to the point where it could actually be quite difficult to make Kenway jump at specific angles because the geometry would be sucking you in a different direction. I remember trying to grab specific song sheets back in the day, being like, "Just jump over there, man, just fucking jump that way," and Kenway wouldn't do it. It was super annoying. Resynced gives you a lot more control, less snap, but you do trade away some of that old familiar weight and momentum to get it. Do I think the parkour in Resynced is bad or worse than it was in the original? I don't actually, I just think it's different. I remember being impressed with improvements made to Mirage. Parkour definitely felt improved there to the point where I quite liked it. I like this too, but I know that hardcore AC parkour fans are no doubt gonna have their own views about all this stuff. Alright, so this video covered a lot of ground, so let's quickly recap what Resynced is looking to deliver when it arrives. Better visuals, obviously, and not just a little bit better, mind you. Vastly better visuals with improved weather effects and ray trace lighting, better, more immersive sound, revised music, and most importantly, new sea shanties. New menus and UI, new locations to visit, existing locations substantially reworked in terms of both the level design and their objectives, reworked mission structure with no desync fail states, new dialogue added to main quests, recruitable naval officers with their own quest chains, an entire 8-mission epilogue expanding the main story, naval combat gets new weapons, stealth gets the ability to crouch at will plus vision affecting mechanics like time of day and weather, combat has been entirely reworked in the way that's inspired by the original, rather than just the modern trilogy combat copy and pasted in, and parkour has been rebuilt in the new Anvil engine with a focus on control and immediacy. Now, looking at that list, there is an argument to be made that Resynced is one of the most ambitious remake projects ever. All remakes look to improve visual fidelity and make quality of life improvements, but very few of them look to overhaul so many aspects of the game, be that core systems or locations, and fewer still look to add so much new content to the game. You could have just slapped a new coat of paint on this thing, and I probably still would have ended up recommending it because Black Flag is just that good, and it's aged much better than you'd expect, but Ubisoft weren't willing to rest on the laurels of this game's timeless brilliance. They really wanted to go the extra mile in every way that they could. In certain areas, this effort is already paying huge dividends. Visually, it's extraordinary, the soundscape is richer, weather effects look better and are more immersive, and improvements to UI, menus, and side content are all welcome. When it comes to the newly added content, particularly the story stuff, it's honestly too early to judge, but I'm hopeful it ends up being truly additive rather than this awkward, ill-fitted bolt-on. I'm pretty comfortable with where parkour is headed, and as for the combat, I genuinely just want to take another swing at it armed with new knowledge and with more time to actually learn it. But coming out of this preview, the biggest emotion I'm experiencing right now is jealousy, because if you have never played Black Flag before and you are experiencing this game for the first time, I am so jealous of you, you are going to lose your mind. Almost everything that made Black Flag great is still here. That sense of adventure, Edward Kenway, the cast of characters, the jackdaw, naval combat, deep sea diving, harpooning a shark, getting into brawls at a tavern, all of it is here. So even if not all of the new elements land as strongly as we might hope, I think the core experience is strong enough to survive those potential shortcomings. Black Flag really is just that good. But I'm also feeling a quiet confidence that Resynced will make it a little, or maybe even a lot better. We're going to find out whether or not that's the case when the game launches on July 9th for PC, Xbox, and PlayStation. Please look forward to my full review around that time. For now though, thanks for watching, and I'll see you again real soon. Bye-bye. Have you ever looked at your ball shaver and thought to yourself, it's nice, but I wish it was in a better color? You probably haven't, but I guarantee you, those thoughts will flood your mind when you gaze upon the beauty, majesty, and splendor of the new Desert Sand colorway for the Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra from this video sponsor, Manscaped. No matter which color lawnmower you pick up, your body hair will tremble in fear at the sight of it. The updated trimmer blade features longer, wider, and rounded teeth to tackle hair effortlessly, while the foil blade provides a sleek, smooth finish, and switching between them is a breeze. Just a quick push and it's in. That's what she said. But the features don't stop there. For the Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra features dual LED spotlights to provide contrast on multiple skin tones. With this sort of illumination, there is nowhere for your wayward hairs to hide. There's also a handy travel lock feature, ensuring that the Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra won't turn on in your carry-on, because that would be a little awkward. And it also comes with everything you'd expect from a top-of-the-line trimmer, including a rechargeable battery charge via USB, and it's waterproof, allowing for easy use in the shower and easy cleaning when you're done. Manscaped are so confident in the build quality of the Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra that they offer a 2-year warranty on it, and the lovely Desert Sand colorway is a fantastic excuse to jump in, join the Manscaped family, and start taking care of the family jewels. The Desert Sand colorway is a strictly limited edition offering though, so do get in quick by visiting manscaped.com/skillup and using offer code SKILLUP at checkout. That'll get you 15% off your order plus free shipping. That's manscaped.com/skillup, offer code SKILLUP at checkout for 15% off plus free shipping. Thanks Manscaped for sponsoring the video, and thank you for watching it.